back to my channel. I'm Erica. Today I'm going to be sewing on my Barn Star sampler quilt. I've already started sewing on block 2. If I haven't showed you already, I did get this spiral bound because I knew I was going to be flipping through the book a lot and wanting to turn pages, and I like to fold my books over. So I decided to take it to a local print shop and get it spiral bound. And I love that. I've done this with some other books and I just love when I do that. I started sewing on block 2, and I had some people comment, and so I wanted to just share that I was inspired to do this quilt. When I first saw this pattern posted, I think on Instagram, it's probably been over a year ago, I just loved the pattern. And I think I was just drawn to all the colors. So I followed along with Pat Sloan. She has several videos here on YouTube, and she has completed her quilt, and I followed along with her. I've also seen the Fat Quarter Shop and their quilt along that they did. I love seeing all the different colorways. I actually went to, I took this Barn Star sampler and just looked up the hashtag on Instagram, and I was able to see all the different color combinations. So it's a lot of fun. So if you're interested in making this quilt, that's something you could do to help you get inspiration. Again, I'm just pulling from my stash. I did have to buy some raspberry fat quarters to go along with, I already had one raspberry fat quarter in my stash, but I wanted to have more. So when I was at the quilt store the other day, I picked up a raspberry fat quarter. And when I go back to the quilt store, I actually want to get a little bit more raspberry fabric because I just love, this quilt has all this, like, to me, this is raspberry in it. Maybe not a super deep raspberry, but like over here, and in here, I really like the raspberry. Okay, so I already started sewing on block 2, and I'm going to hopefully finish block 2 today. Block 2, they are 24-inch blocks, and there are 2 of them. And for my blocks, I'm going to be making them identical or close to being identical. I didn't have enough background fabric to match 100%, so they will be slightly different in the background fabrics. But I'm trying to make them somewhat identical, and I'll show you my blocks when I get done. Here's block 2. I've sewn a little bit, and I hope to maybe finish 1 or 2 of these blocks today. Here's my sewing progress. This is where I'm at. I'm almost done with block 2. I wanted to ask you guys, do you pin or do you not pin? Tell me down in the comments if you pin or don't pin, or maybe you pin sometimes and other times you don't. I wanted to share a tip with you, something that I do when I pin and sew my flying geese. So I like to pin on this side so that I can actually see the flying geese that I'm sewing next, attaching it next to my block. Rather than flipping it over and sewing like this, I can't see my point on that other flying geese. So I like to do it like this so I can see that point of the flying geese. And what I like to do when I'm sewing, I like to just sew right here. If I sew right here on the edge here and make sure that my stitch line does not come, if my stitch line comes over here, I will lose my point. But if my stitch line comes right here at that intersection, I will keep my point. So you can see, for example, on here, see how I have a nice point? That is because when I sewed it, let me see if I can show you. When I sewed it, the stitch line, when I put it in my machine, it comes right down here, and you can see that it stays to the right of that point instead of going over to the left. If it was to come over to the left here, I would lose my point. But since that stitch line are right there on the point, I guess you could say, I was able to have a pretty nice point. I'm at my sewing machine, and let me show you what I mean. So as I'm sewing, I'm going to remove that pin. I am going to make sure that my stitch line, and I do have my scant 1/4 inch, but if I ever have to fudge it, I can just scoot this over, scoot my fabric over so I don't go past that point of my flying geese. So right now, I'm just going to keep sewing. And let me show you. Right here, I have my point. So I was able to keep my point by sewing it with the flying geese. Oops, now I got it all turned around. With the flying geese point face up and making sure I didn't cross over that line. And so when I flip this back, I have a perfect crisp point. So that's a little tip I learned along the way. I used to always lose my points in flying geese, but once I learned that, I was able to save all my flying geese points. Assembling the block, I'm on the last step. Okay, here's block 2 all laid out. And one thing I wanted to point out is when I sewed block 1, I completed 1 block and then I continued to sew my second block. But on this one, I actually did some chain piecing. So you can see here, I have my 2 blocks laid out. So I wanted this to go a little bit faster. Just finished my Barn Star Sampler, block 2. And I love them. I really love the raspberry. What do you guys think about that raspberry? I know it's not a deep raspberry, but as deep as a raspberry as my first block. But there they are. These are block 2. They measure 24 inches by 24 inches, and the pattern calls for making 2 block 2s. So just to compare, here is block 2 in the book, and there are my blocks. Block 1 and block 2 for comparison, and I'm making progress on this quilt. I'm super excited. Thanks for watching. See you next time.